already being recorded, Linda. I
Yeah,
think it's
somebody
already
else is
recording.
recording it though for their AI. That's what that was. That wasn't me.
Ah, okay. Okay, I thought it was you. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
no, I'm recording now though. So
okay,
I'm
perfect.
ready if you want to go ahead.
Yes. So I think we can get started, and if anyone then will join, then we'll have of course, the recording. So welcome everyone. It's really nice to see that many of you are joining our launch event for our non-state torture network. Um, just to jump in already to what we want to achieve here with our network, what we're starting here is a truly global women's revolution dedicated to naming, exposing, and dismantling non-state torture, crimes against women and girls, and fight against patriarchal misogyny. Just to give you a bit of context, our network emerged from feminist mobilization, collaboration, and women's truth-telling of survival, rooted in historical and transformative gathering in the FiLiA Conference in the UK this year in Brighton for the 10th anniversary of the conference. And for, I think most of you know, but it is one of the largest annual grassroots feminist conferences. And that's where the idea for the network came up. Just to give you an introduction, a short introduction also of the group that formed this informal network. Here we have Elizabeth with us. Megan is also part of the network but could not be here today. Maria, Catalina, Jean, Linda, and myself, we are the founders of the network. A little bit more context. So during the FiLiA conference, of course, inspired by the conference feminist mobilization spirit after our panel, I had the idea of creating this network. And this comes from, of course, my background witnessing non-state torture as part of the work as expert on violence against women and also leading a feminist NGO in Portugal. But of course, building on
we're waiting for orders. So do you mind getting a book of 6? I only have one book of 10.
I muted all and I'll mute you, Mariana. Okay, how do I do that now? There,
I
quick.
think I'm muted.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So as I was saying,
Could everyone else please mute themselves? Thank you. We had some conversation there.
yes, thank you. Thank you, Linda. So as I was saying, this idea that came up in the FiLiA conference came also from my background as witnessing non-state torture and as part of my work as an expert on violence against women and leading NGOs, particularly in Portugal. And of course, building on the work Linda and Jean had led in the last 33 years, listening and documenting women's stories on non-state torture crimes, and of course, coining the term non-state torture. That being said, our network is about connecting women around the topic, building collective knowledge and evidence, and give visibility to the concept of non-state torture. I would like now to invite two of the members of the network, Catalina and Maria, and they will tell you, they will share what this experience at the FiLiA conference meant to them, and also, of course, that led to the creation of this network.
Thank you, Mariana. Well, my name is Catalina. I am Mariana's partner, and my life and I guess dedication to women's rights started around 2 years ago when I met Mariana. And I always wanted to. I am a political science bachelor's. I did my bachelor's in the Netherlands at Leiden University, and I always had a feeling that I would get into activism, but I never knew in what kind of entryway. And one of those entryways that really has made a mark in my life was FiLiA. At FiLiA, I immediately felt an empowering sense of kinship from the women I spoke to, and that there was this harmony that didn't need to be explained. I was very moved by how candid the women were in explaining their everyday struggles and exposed the gendered reality of many topics such as trafficking, non-state torture crimes in pornography, and prostitution. Alongside Mariana and meeting Jean, Linda, Megan, and Elizabeth for the first time, I got to patch together my understanding of the often overlooked crime and human rights violation of non-state torture. I was immediately inspired by their dedication and activism that has spanned decades. After this panel at FiLiA 2025, we met up the following day to discuss the next steps, which led to a creative light bulb that would ignite over us. We didn't want our ideas, reflections, and projects to remain in Brighton. Rather, we wanted to create a forum for activists, policymakers, and legal experts to share, no matter where they are. It is with the spirit of sisterhood that we decided to found NNST and to start filming an NNST documentary that I will explain in a later slide, to spread to the world that, in the words of Linda and Jean, human rights are women's rights. She must be seen as a woman, and as a woman entitled to her human rights, not to be subjected to torture. And now I will pass on to Maria's takeaway from this day at FiLiA.
You're muted, Maria.
I think Maria is still muted, but we'll wait a few seconds. You should see it in the bottom on the left side of the screen.
Maria, just where it says unmute.
Hey, Linda,
Yeah.
just as a suggestion, this is Dorothy, just as a suggestion, if somebody on the panel may have muted everybody, you're going to have to probably unmute as well.
Yes, I think that's a good point. So
Can you unmute now? Okay, try it now, Maria. Oh, gosh.
I think
No.
Maria is still.
Okay, here we are.
Okay. Go ahead,
Oh.
Maria. The floor is yours.
My name is Maria. I'm from Portugal. I am a member of the board of the Portuguese NGO AMCV, Women Against Violence Association. I'm also a survivor. In FiLiA 2025, I attended a panel on non-state torture, which for me was one of the most significant moments at the conference. As I've been long a great admirer of the inspiring and deeply relevant work that Jean Sarson and Linda MacDonald have developed over the last 33 years. In the same panel, there were also other remarkable activists. The presentation was powerful, and the Q&A moment was very intense and highly engaged. When the session reaches the end, there was still a great deal of discussion and interaction. In face of this, Jean and Linda decided to schedule an informal meeting to the following day to give continuity to the conversation. And so we meet again the next day, despite some logistical challenges. We gathered at the art space, sitting on the floor beneath Elizabeth's wonderful and powerful drawings. Other women joined us as the conversation unfolded, and together we shared knowledge, experiences, stories, motivations, hopes, and fears. On one thing we all agree upon was the urgency and the priority of focusing on non-state torture and the importance of communicating about it more widely in order to reach all those committed to advocacy. The idea seemed quite simple at first, but of course it wasn't. The real challenge was yet to come. It was how, when, where, and many other questions that quickly came to our minds. As we continued brainstorming, Mariana had the most brilliant idea for this project, the Network Against Non-State Torture, which was immediately welcomed and applauded. As someone observed, at the time, we were sitting side by side in a circle. That was not a trivial detail. It meant equality, support, balance. A structure capable of growing and intersecting with other circles beyond that space. For me, the circle perfectly captured the essence of what was happening there. That moment marked the very beginning. A simple circle of women, some meeting for the first time, from different countries, different backgrounds, ages, fields, yet sitting side by side, creating a shared project with the strength and the will to carry it forward. That was the true spirit of sisterhood, feminism, revolution. Maybe everything can begin just like that, a small circle of women. So I give the ground to you, Mariana.
Thank you, Maria. No, thank you both, Maria and Catalina. I think this was very important to hear, as it was indeed the space where the ideas started bubbling about the network, and that's how the network emerged. And of course, in this informal space where we were having a strategy meeting, and in a space we're surrounded by wonderful feminist art. And particularly Elizabeth's art. She will tell you a bit more in a bit. Now I would like to hand it over to Linda, which will talk to us about the introduction of the concept of non-state torture, the definition, and the patriarchal divide.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well, of course, I'll wait for the first slide, but what we really need to know is what is non-state torture and who are the torturers. That's where we started many years ago in 1993, Jean and I did. And this definition really is a composite of our theory, our listening, women's voices, work with the European network of migrant women, and then talking at FiLiA. It's been an evolving definition, and isn't that the feminist way? So what is non-state torture? It's committed intentionally by non-state actors in public or private, in relationships, perpetrated within families, and that's where our work first started, in families, in human trafficking. And many of the families traffic, and then you don't have to be trafficked by a family member as well. In prostitution, and today in Scottish Parliament, MP Ash Regan talked about the torture in prostitution in a private member's bill that she's bringing forward. In pornographic exploitation by violent individuals, groups, and gangs, dismissed as socio-cultural, traditional, or religious acts or norms, and can be committed during migration, displacement, and in humanitarian and civil unrest, for example. And of course, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says no one shall be subjected to torture. And what we're saying is all of these forms of non-state torture are still not being recognized as crimes and human rights violations. And all of the different torturers are human traffickers, are buyers, are pimps, pornographers, individuals in gangs, social, cultural, religion, and such. So what are the acts of state torture and how do women's descriptions compare? Well, state torture is torture that is perpetrated in a state-sanctioned format, such as in an embassy, in military, with prisoners of war, in prisons, if they're sanctioned. So what we're saying is the acts of torture, or the classic torture that is on the left side of the PowerPoint, are the exact same acts of non-state torturers on the right side of the PowerPoint. And in the middle is a patriarchal divide, a very strong wall, saying that only acts of state torture, mostly perpetrated, and men are the most often the victim of state torture, that those are the only acts that can be recognized as non-state, as torture. And what we're saying today is that is not true, that the acts of non-state torturers, the exact same acts as electric shocking, the beaten, burned, whipped, cut, immobilization tortures, being tied and hung, water torture, suffocation and choking tortures, sexualized tortures such as rapes, gang rapes, repetitive rapes, raped with a gun or an object, forced drugging, nutritional deprivation, psychological tortures such as humiliation, degradation, dehumanization, animalization, terrorization, and horrification, which often results in women becoming speechless, forced nakedness, sleep deprivation, witnessing the torture of others, and powerlessness. Those are the exact same acts that happened whether it's in a military premise or in the bathroom of a home. And what we're saying is in state torture, water torture, for instance, a man could be tied down with a cloth over his head or dunked in a barrel. And in a home, a woman or a little girl could have her head dunked in the toilet, in a bucket, in the sink, in the tub. And that indeed is water torture, just the same as state water torture. So we're saying that we want the inequality or the discrimination that happens to women and girls who are subjected to non-state torture for that to end, and to have a global reality that indeed millions of women and girls are subjected to non-state torture all around the world. So that's the basis of our premise, our foundation of our work, and the inequality that we're still talking about 33 years later. So thank you very much. I'll go to the next person.
Thank you, Linda. I think this is exactly our starting point of the network, the concept of non-state torture, and of course the importance of naming acts of non-state torture, and of course building stronger or legal frameworks that categorize violence against women and girls as non-state torture. I would like to move in now to a different part of this event today, and I would like to share with you all the resources and the initiatives of the network. As we are building the network against non-state torture, we have key goals, priorities that will lead the strategy of the network. The first one is creating a feminist victim-centered space for non-state torture, victimization, traumatization informed healing, and of course, as I was saying, gaining political recognition, and that is also connected with creating legal frameworks on non-state torture. The second goal, and this is a very important one, something that myself as a lawyer I have lobbied for in the last years, not only in the country where I'm from, but a bit across Europe, is to support feminist lawyers and advocates so that domestic, national, and international law and courts begin to name torture and torture crimes per se. This is a challenge, quite a big challenge, we all know, but we need to build, of course, legal reasonings so that feminist lawyers can use the concept to defend victims and survivors of non-state torture. The third goal is to build a feminist legal resource center that will be, for now, an online library on non-state torture, which all of you will have access to by bringing together materials, research, and, of course, women and girls non-state torture victimization informed knowledge. Our fifth goal is to organize for this year of 2026 a one-day in-person transformative gathering in Lisbon. We, of course, will explore all these topics in more detail. We'll have women joining from all parts of the world, but also, of course, Portuguese activists and feminists, since the conference will be indeed in Portugal. And we'll also have a feminist art exhibition. So we hope that all of you here can join us on the 5th of November in 2026, so this year. Finally, the last goal that we have planned for the network is to create a documentary project on non-state torture and the evolution of the network. So for this point, I would like to turn to Catalina, that will tell us a bit more about the idea to film this document.
Can you hear me?
Try it again, Kat. Yeah, there we are.
Okay, I think perfect. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you for explaining also like I guess the central tenets of NNST. And well, I'm not a filmmaker by practice, but it has always been a bit of a dream of mine to kind of experiment with the art. And well, the need to create a documentary on NST began even before arriving in Brighton. Before meeting Mariana, I never once heard about non-state torture. While reading Jean and Linda's book, I was even more astonished that NST was not making headlines daily. I have never read such a life-altering book. That is why it was a no-brainer, especially after meeting Jean and Linda themselves, that an NST documentary had to be made. Upon researching and viewing documentaries on related topics, I realized that there often was no call to hope once they rolled the credits. For this reason, I reflected on a metaphor that moved me in Jean and Linda's book, especially shown in this quote. Doing this work to help rescue Sarah and other women is like trying to drill through social denial bedrock that fails to hear their calls for help. An escape tunnel for their journey to society's surface gets plastered with blocks thrown down the tunnel over and over again. Their rescue cries remain unheard. A carrying capsule is still not present for them, as it was not for us. This quote references the 2010 Chilean miner accident, in which 33 men were trapped 700 meters underground and rescued just 69 days later. For Jean and Linda, the countless victims of non-state torture worldwide are experiencing the same, or even worse, level of devastation, with no way out. For this documentary, I want to create an empowering gateway to NST as a topic, to offer a visual representation via a carrying capsule that every woman and girl that has survived NST victimization can heal and live in hopes of transformation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Catalina. I think we're all very excited about starting to film the documentary, and of course seeing the result, because this will be a 1 year long work. So we're very, very excited to see how we look at the end. We would like to now move to our last part of our lunch event, and we'll cover one of the key points of our action in this network. So now I will hand it over to Jean and Elizabeth that will tell us more about non-state torture, victimization, traumatization, informed healing, storytelling, and feminist approaches.
Thanks, Mariana. Could you put my first slide up? Thanks. Great. I'm an artist and a feminist art activist, and I survived non-state torture, family-based torture and trafficking in my childhood. I contribute my words and my art towards gathering women and girls' non-state torture victimization informed knowledge. I've learned recently that telling my story is a reflective success of my healing. So I thought I'd tell a little about escaping from my home and about how eventually I found feminist human rights-based support that respectfully named the non-state torture I'd survived. The first time I attempted to escape from my home, I was 5 years old. I tried again when I was around 8 or 9, and again when I was 16. When I was 20, I was a student and still struggling to escape from the life-threatening torture environment at home. That year, I tried to get help from my doctor, who instead of asking me about the torture I was suffering, referred me to a psychiatrist at the hospital. At the first appointment, I was surrounded by a group of men psychiatrists in white coats who stared at me. The head psychiatrist threatened me that if I didn't take the medication he'd prescribed, I'd be admitted to the hospital as an inpatient. So in reaching out for help, I'd become caught in the patriarchal, pathologizing, misogynistic system, and I was being threatened with being forcibly drugged and being incarcerated in the hospital if I didn't comply. I was angry. I wanted to be free. That's how I felt then. I went into my resistance. I made 2 escape plans, a plan to escape from the psychiatric system and a plan to escape from my family home. First, I got myself discharged from the outpatient psychiatry department by saying that I was leaving the city as my college course was finishing. I also changed doctors. I was very clear with myself about not taking the drugs for lots of reasons. And I remember throwing the bottle of tablets out of the train window. And going back to the first slide, and I escaped from home a couple of months later with the help from a friend. So on the next slide, I was free, but not free from the triggered conditioning that kept me dissociatively in danger and re-victimized by the criminal group. Over many years, I was telling different health professionals, but I was never asked how I'd been harmed in my childhood, and now it was continuing into my early adulthood. Even though I'd dissociated many of the torture ordeals, I was telling with my drawings and my body talk responses about torture and trafficking, but this was named as abuse, child sexual abuse, or assault, or nobody wanted to hear at all. Anyway, those terms didn't fit for me. I gave up trying to tell for a lot of those years. Silenced, I continued feeling self-blame and self-shame, and my torture responses continued unhealed. They just became normal to me. Then one day in 2009, I found Jean and Linda. At last, I was able to tell about the torture. They supported me through the hard work of recovering and healing. Seeing each of the torture victimization harms listed on Jean and Linda's questionnaire, harms inflicted in NST, was crucial to my being able to heal so I could identify each torture harm I'd suffered. Then I could tell who'd inflicted the torture harms and know it had never been my fault. One of the torture victimization harms on this list is drugging. I'd been drugged by the perpetrators. Knowing this helped me to make sense of my torture responses of feeling very dizzy. I learned that my human rights not to be tortured had been violated. The shame and the blame belonged to the perpetrators of the crimes. Around the world, millions of infants, girls, children, and women who've suffered non-state torture need legal support and laws that name NSTs so the perpetrators do not get away with these horrific crimes. Women and children need their human rights respected so they can tell their individual non-state torture stories and be listened to with non-pathologizing, feminist, human rights-based, non-state torture, victimization, traumatization, informed care. So I'm absolutely thrilled we're launching this new network against non-state torture. Thanks. Over to Jean.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's been a long relational journey. So It's wonderful to hear you talk about it in a reflective way. So my slide dates back really to 1993 when the first woman came to Linda and I saying that she had been tortured by her family and trafficked by the age of 2 years. And back in 1993, there was no information that we could find that told us how to proceed to help her. We couldn't find anyone who would attend to her needs, so we decided to stay with her. So what you see here is the evolution of the care that developed with her name is Sarah and other women that followed, and now Elizabeth, who shared in a reflective way. So the first term, non-state torture, it names the violence. It upholds the feminist practice of how important it is that women have the right to name the violence that they survived. It shapes the research, and when we shape the research, we collectively cause collective wisdom to evolve. And Elizabeth mentioned the questionnaire, and there you have it. I know you can't totally read all the issues on it, but we can give you links. So it has 48 forms of different acts of non-state torture, whether they're physical, sexualized, emotional, and psychological. And there's a space for women or any respondent. We have a few respondents from men, but mostly predominantly from women. And one woman wrote, "I was not abused, I was tortured. I am recovering, but it is crucial to call it by its real name. Thank you for creating the questionnaire. It was very validating." So that's what the healing component is. It helps women understand they're not alone when we develop collective wisdom. So the second term, victimization, what that means is there's a crime being committed. Somebody has been hurt intentionally by somebody else when it comes to torture. Torture is never accidental. It's a violation of human rights, Article 5, that Linda brought in. And also globally, torture is considered prohibited under any circumstance. However, the issue of non-state torture of women and girls has not been addressed, and even though it affects millions of women and girls. So the process of naming it victimization, women can learn in the healing that it was never their fault and they were not to blame, which is what Elizabeth has also shared, and that the perpetrators are totally responsible. And here again, the model that we attach to this shows global data. And if you look at the left-hand side, Elizabeth and the first woman, Sarah, it started for Linda and I in the family, and it starts very young. And I'll just quickly go across the scale. It happens in exploitation, which Linda has said in her introduction to. It happens in prostitution. It happens in pornography. It happens in rituals in prostitution in some countries. It happens in enforced disappearances that are perpetrated by non-state actors. It happens in slavery, in forced labor, in domestic labor against migrant women, and it happens as perpetrated by groups and gangs. But also in there, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture also brought in issues that are traditional or cultural norms, such as female genital mutilation. They identified as a form of torture. In child marriage, could be in enforced marriages, and in sorcery and witch burning, and in acid burning. Here again, more forms of non-state torture that affect millions of women and girls in every country on this planet. Traumatization, the third word, we look at it as survival responses. Amazingly, women, their bodies and minds develop a way to survive, and we do not pathologize it. We normalize amazingly as post-traumatic stress responses. And we have to be cautious because the perpetrators may condition or consequent a suicidal response when the suffering seems impossible to deal with. We call it a femicide because indeed it is an issue of the non-state torturers who have perpetrated the harm. And underneath that is a picture of me standing in an interactive model about developing a relationship with oneself, because non-state torturers, their goal is to destroy that, to dehumanize the women and girls that they victimize. So the healing is to regain that relationship with yourself. So I'll put the link in the chat later. And the fourth, informed care, is strictly non-pathology. It involves nursing and feminism and massive education and human rights and understanding patriarchy and the misogyny and the femimisogyny when women also harm other women. And the healing that goes on here when all this education and healing goes on is that it's a reflective outcome, which here again, Elizabeth shared so openly with us. So the model that we use around understanding patriarchy and misogyny and the inequality that women and girls survive is a social formation model. It's having some concept of how our evolution prevents equality of women and girls and prevents the issue of non-state torture being identified as a crime, human rights crime against them. So this model is in our first book, Women in Silence, and what it does, it shapes up how domination and subordination is formulated between men having domination and women subordinated, how power and control and oppression occur, how it impacts our culture and every structure in our culture and the practices in those structures. And that's what Catalina and Mariana are talking about, the legal issue that we have to address to change that. And it happens in relationships, as we've been talking about. So thank you very much, and we look forward for your questions.
Very much, Jean. Well, now we have a space for questions and for any comments that you have, any insights. I see a lot of familiar faces, colleagues and friends here, which makes me very happy. And I think we'll all beyond amazed with the participation of everyone to have 43 women here talking about non-state torture. I think it's a huge accomplishment for all of us here. So we're very moved and very happy. So feel free to share, to take the space to ask any questions that you may have. I already see Orla. Go ahead. You have raised your hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'm thank you. This is amazing. I'm so honored to be at this. I feel like it's a really overdue thing, especially given the current news. But my question, actually, I'm writing an article on euthanasia, assisted suicide, and I hadn't really thought of that in terms of non-state torture, and I just wanted to hear the thoughts on this, because in Canada we've had a case where a husband was able to override his wife's concern, and he got her killed legally. So this is legalized femicide, right? So yeah, I am at work. Nobody's here right now, so I'm gonna just throw that question out there and mute myself. Thank you so much to all of you wonderful women. Thank you.
Thank you, Orla. I don't know if Jean, you want to take this question, or
I can say something about that.
perfect.
It's a struggle, really. As soon as I think of the situation that you brought up, Orla, I remember the first time I learned, and that's like 2 decades ago, and it was a European woman who had the first case of euthanasia. I don't know if it was Denmark or the Netherlands, but it haunted me because it wasn't her husband that caused her to be euthanized. It was the system. So in some ways, Orla, you're talking about the system. Her husband has a position in the system, a patriarchal system. And until we unravel that, the system supports that. So going back to the first case, it was a woman who had 2 sons and had a very violent male relationship with her husband. And her 2 sons eventually committed so-called suicide. And she said she was so depressed and could not cope. And the system could not help her, that was her option. So it's haunted me, because how can it be that a perpetrator walks away freely and the system does not provide the care that is required for the two sons and for her to survive. So if you're asking about writing the letter, you may want to put that in, that it's a system too that is supporting the husband to do that. So we have both the immediate direct kind of perpetrator, but also the system and everyone connected to that system that allows that to be proceed and to be silenced. So I think we are developing ways of really how massive maybe non-state torture and femicide is. I'll pass it over to anyone else who'd like to comment.
Thank you so much, Jean. I think we have another question from Lois. Yes.
Yes, hello. I'm Lois A. Herman. I'm the managing director of One Run, the Women's UN Report Network, and also on the board of the U.S. UN Women's Caucus. I've known Linda and Jeannie for 30-some years. We've been trying many different ways to bring non-state torture forward. And I'd like to reflect for a moment on what we faced in Geneva at the UN. Thankfully, this UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, different ones have spoken out about issues that are essentially non-state torture. One was FGM, that was considered torture, and another was acid attacks. But it's so hard to get enforcement, to get monitoring, to get a follow-up of accountability. And I know someone else who has said this was Dubravka Simonovich, the past special rapporteur on violence against women, who really studied femicide in detail. And so often, femicide is not considered, is not monitored or considered torture. I'm holding up a book right now that was done in the state of Minnesota, which is where I am, pretty violent right now. And I also lived in Italy during COVID. And I think during COVID, the cases of non-state torture went up. But this is an example of a house in Duluth where girls who were running away, who were subject to torture, went together, supported each other, and actually made a film. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your question and for your comments as well.
Dorothy has in the chat that she can't raise her hand. So do you want to ask your question, Dorothy?
Sure. Years ago, I was running an NGO. I had left the military because of corruption, and ended up running an NGO. And as many of you probably already know, historically, that you often, depending on how you've been tortured, you don't necessarily know you've been tortured because of the drugs, the torture, the trauma, and all that other. My point being is that sadly, I was in the room with many nationally known in the US, nationally known NGOs, and I witnessed them being captured, hostilely taken over by entities that was non-responsive to survivors and victims. So, and I ended up losing my NGO because I would not be compromised as to what I was saying and the facts that I was discovering that was allowing for specifically going after children who were sexually abused within the house or community, because as I've seen, bullying is part of that, grooming, conditioning throughout the school system and other places, into human trafficking in many different career paths, including the US military overseas and here in the States. So one thing I guess I would propose to the this community is possibly a contract, an individual contract written and signed by all persons, because sadly, with all the different places I've been and all the different organizations that I have gone to, I have seen predators infiltrate into every organization I've ever been a part of. And that's a sad fact. Men or women, we have infiltrators. And the contract may be just something that can be written, that if written in the right ways can actually put a person, I don't know. I'm trying to think outside the box that I know a lot of these predators are operating in, because I've seen so many of them.
Well, thank you for that suggestion, Dorothy. We'll certainly take that into advisement. Thank you, because you have a lot of experience. I see that Patricia has a question. Do you want to ask it, Patricia, or do you just want me to read it from the chat? Okay, I'll read it. From a pedagogical and political perspective, how do we explain the difference between violence and non-state torture? What criteria help mark that threshold, and why is it so important to name it in human rights terms? And if we think of the network as a collective space of construction, shouldn't this pedagogical work be a shared task of the feminist movement? My thinking goes back to the grassroots, to the street level organizing, and to the feminist movement in Spain that I know well. Who wants to take that one?
I think we can all contribute to this. Maybe, I don't know, Linda, if you want to talk about, again, the non-state torture concept, and then I take over for the rest of the.
Well, non-state torture is a form of violence, primarily violence against women and girls, because the majority of the victims or survivors are women and girls from our perspective. Until men come forward in large numbers, that's the knowledge base that we have. And there's a continuum of violence. It starts with neglect, and then we go to abuse, and then we go to torture and femicide. And the distinction between abuse and torture is abuse is control and power, or an exertion of control, power and control over the person to control their life. With non-state torture or state torture, both, the goal of the perpetrator is the complete destruction of the sense of self of the person that they are torturing. Now, that doesn't always happen, thankfully, but that is certainly the goal of the non-state torturer. So they have a different intention. It's never accidental. Non-state torture or state torture, neither one of them can be accidental. It's always intentional. So that's the basic difference between the different forms of violence. And femicide, of course, is the most extreme, because it deliberately takes the life of a girl or a woman, specifically because of them being a girl or a woman.
And regarding the rest, what we all just mentioned several times already is that the naming is very important. And that's what why we're repeating this message on and on. We know also that torture has historically been interpreted from a male-centric point of view, and that of course, it ignores all the forms of violence that women have endured. We also know that nobody wants to talk about torture. And that's why we're here, because that would entail questioning a system that preys on women, and a system that denies women justice, a system that tells women, well, we'll not protect you and will instead abandon you or terrorize you. So this is the challenge. And we have also talked a lot about healing here, and I think from Linda's and Jean's new book, it is very critical, and it is one of the main points mentioned by survivors, and it was also mentioned here by Elizabeth, that the naming is key for the healing process. So I would say that this is one of the main points we want to make sure, and also because, as we mentioned, one of our main priorities is to disseminate educational materials. So one of the main goals of this network is to raise awareness. And I'll also talk a little bit more about this in the next point, but by providing sessions and also different materials that will be available on an online library, hopefully lawyers, policymakers, activists can rely on this so we can start talking about this, because naming matters and words do matter. That's why we're all of us here pushing for the categorization of forms of violence against women as torture per se, not just as inhumane or degrading treatment. No, we're talking about torture per se. So this is what we're all trying to accomplish here, hopefully.
Mariana, we have 7 minutes left, and I see Isabel and Mary has their hand up. And Liz, you did have your hand up. Do you want to put it back up? So we have time for 3 more questions before we do the roundup. Is that okay?
I think that could be a good idea. We take more these 2 questions and then we move to the final.
3.
Yeah.
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 I don't remember if it was Isabel or Mary that was first.
I think, yeah.
Okay, Isabel, you must take your hand down, Isabel. Anyways, we'll go with Mary. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Adams. I'm the co-chair of human rights for an international women's organization named FALCO. And I met Jean and Linda when I was the work group leader for the NGO CSW, and actually Lois as well, for Geneva and the 30-year review of the Beijing Platform for Action. I really wanted to pick up on something that Mariana said about raising awareness. And I think one of the key things that has raised my awareness has been the Netflix documentaries. They have a huge audience. If you look at the power of these, we see the Menendez brothers who murdered their parents actually got another trial, because what I saw, I interpreted as non-state torture. There's another one about the evil influencer, Jody Hildebrandt, and the children in Utah. And what we can see, and sometimes what's missing from Netflix in the follow-up, is that connection that links it from child abuse and transforms it into child torture. And Linda was kind enough to send me, after I was so surprised that after the movie, the impact it had in Utah, where they actually passed legislation. And so I think that we need to look at this a little bit closer. I think that if you look at what Netflix is doing with the power of documentaries, we have a really strong story to tell. So I would say we need to consider partnerships, not only making our own films, which they might fund, but also in linking together and telling the story about the films that they already said. And I'm sorry, I've got another call that I have to jump on, but I would really like to stay in touch. I'm really happy to help in any type of strategic or operational implementation that you have for this. And thank you so much for sharing. It's been very, very educational.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, Liz.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this group, Jean and Linda. I just quickly wanted to introduce myself, and I'll keep it to 2 minutes here. I identify as a Hague mother. So for those of you that don't know what this arena is about, we are mothers that have had the International Hague Convention pertaining to the civil aspects of child abduction weaponized against us. And through meeting with Jean and Linda, I was able to validate that the father of my son had weaponized the Hague Convention against me, and he was using it at the time as a form of torture. He had separated, my son and I were separated because of the convention, and I ended up being without contact with my son for almost 14 months. And during that time, my son's father had indicated he would hope that I would take my life due to the fact that I was separated from my child. What I wanted to mention, because I see a number of international participants, especially from the Netherlands, my case involved the Canadian jurisdiction, Spanish jurisdiction, and the Netherlands. And the Netherlands the Dutch ombudsman So the National and Kinder Ombudsman investigated my situation and my case, and they came out with a report where they cited human rights violations against my son and myself based on the manner with which my case had been handled. I also wanted to mention, through a working group in Canada that's focused on court resource documentation for Hague mothers, we identified a case where a Latvian woman had come to Canada seeking refugee status because she was escaping domestic violence. And when the case came in front of the courts, due to tension between the International Hague Convention and the refugee status won. And so it indicated that domestic violence was a reason for this mother and child to be able to establish that status here in Canada, to escape specifically domestic violence. And we find, I think Jean and Linda, you can probably speak to this a bit more, but we are finding that border between domestic violence and abuse and non-state torture is just becoming so fine. So I just wanted to bring a couple little nuggets forward. I'm happy to provide the links to those resources, and I would very much love to continue to work with you in any way that I can. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing in the Hague mothers, Liz. And of course, when you don't know where your child is, that's a forced disappearance, which is recognized as a form of torture because it's so horrific not to know where your loved child is. So I don't see any more questions. So I think now.
I think we have a question from Isabella. I think.
Okay. I don't see it. Isabella, did you want to say your question?
Hello, everybody. That was not really a question, that was just jumping on what you said earlier, that I'm a lawyer, I'm in Paris, and I do criminal law and a lot of asylum law. And we do need material that we can bring before courts, because judges, they don't create the intellectual material within their decisions. In fact, we as lawyers bring it to judges. And even if when we have everything and they reject our case and they don't want to see violences and they don't want to see tortures, etc., it's more a question of misogyny in courts and, of course, training, etc. But most of the time, we don't have enough material. I mean, we cannot rely on academics because they are really behind us, and we support our clients every day. So we do need to think together to bring more and more discussion, more and more arguments to help us before courts. So the support for lawyers is really, really, really important. Thank you.
Well,
Yes.
Patricia, I see your hand. It's 2:00. Can we take one more question and then you give some ideas for the way we move forward, Mariana? Okay.
Yes, we take Patricia's and then we have to really end, but we'll continue these discussions, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Patricia.
I wanted to suggest some solution, like it's too late now, but to have an event on CSW New York to speak about non-state torture, and to invite countries to hear it, and to invite how do you say, to invite UN specialists, experts, also special rapporteurs, to hear all about it and to make a report, to make a research, to have a resolution on this.
Yeah, that's what we'd like. We've never been fortunate enough to get a country to do a side event. We are involved in a parallel event this year at CSW on March the 12th from 12:30 to 2 in the church building. Women's Graduate USA, Jeanette Westbrook is organizing that, so we're there for that. But if anybody wants to organize a side event next year, that would be great. That's important. And I think
Let us speak about it earlier, Linda, because I'm organizing my side event with already 4 states, and I could have more states also, you know?
Yeah, I hear
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
would be something definitely to to
I
look
will
for.
do it. We will see next year.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't think we have much time, so thank you so much for your contributions. I would like to finish this event with a question, raising a question. So where do we go from here? And of course, as a global women's revolution dedicated to naming and exposing, and of course, dismantling non-state torture against women and girls, one of our main pillars will be sharing educational resources. What I was saying, that is so important for our action. And we have prepared a fact sheet that we shared with you that is currently now being translated to French, Spanish, and Portuguese, so you can disseminate widely. And this will be added, of course, to our online library that you all will have access soon. But also, we are available to do any consultation and any sessions, awareness raising on non-state torture, which is something that you brought up in the questions, because this is something that is very much needed. We need to talk about non-state torture. We need to name this, and it's something that is clearly lacking in all the countries worldwide. So in these sessions, we of course could focus on the importance of legal frameworks on non-state torture and naming torture, particularly for the survivors of non-state torture. But also we'll be building our feminist resource center, which is twofold, not only creating awareness on women's non-state torture victimization, but also to help feminist lawyers, as Isabel was mentioning, to frame non-state torture in the courts, and to help the lawyers build a legal reasoning, and well, not always rely on the national laws and criminal codes, but instead go beyond that, which is what we're all trying to do here. And of course, we'll be preparing our final gathering event in Lisbon, and the tentative date will be the 5th of November. So on a final note, I would like to say that I believe all of us here present agree that we need to do more. It is imperative that countries adopt legal frameworks that uphold violence against women as non-state torture, because we need to name the torture, we need to name the patriarchal misogyny, and we need accountability, which is a concept that is key and is clearly missing in all the countries worldwide. Also, to say that knowledge is, and as Linda and Jean mentioned in their book, it is healing for survivors to know that non-state torture against women remains globally ignored in most countries. It is a crime, and it's never women's fault. And women need to know this. So I think this is what we all want to achieve. So we would like to thank you for your presence here.
You want to share the email?
We'll share the email with you. We have an email of the network, so feel free to reach out. We'll also be sharing more resources by email. We'll also share our next steps, possibly have as well a newsletter with more information that we'll share with you, all of you. So thank you very much for everyone. It was nice seeing you all.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be in touch. I'll send out the recording for everyone.
Take a picture. Take a picture.
Yeah, we can take it. Yes, that's true. Okay, done. We'll share with all of you then. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's a historical picture.
That's right.
Exactly.
Hopefully we'll see so many all together in Lisbon. It would be wonderful in November.
Hello, Linda.
Hello.
Elizabeth.
Hi, Patricia.
Nice.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.